Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Department Budget Hearing. Today is Wednesday, April 16, 2024. We will have a presentation tonight from the Hartford Police Department. I am Councilman Amilcar Hernandez. I am Chair of the Operations, Management, Budget, and Government Accountability Committee. This meeting is broadcasting live on HPA-TV's Xfinity Government Channel 96 and Frontier Government Channel 6032. It will also be streamed via HPA-TV.org, the HPA-TV Facebook page, and HPA-TV Apple TV, Amazon TV, and Roku TV apps. It will also be made available on the HPA-TV YouTube channel. I would like to acknowledge my council colleagues present here today. Starting on my left, on the screen we have Councilman Thomas, Councilman Mitchton, Councilman Gale, Council President Shirley Surgeon, Majority Leader Rossetti, Councilwoman Bilodeau, and Councilwoman Rosado. And Councilman Assistant Majority Leader Clark will be joining us in a few minutes. Tonight's presentation will be the Hartford Police Department, and I would like to introduce our Police Department Chief Story. And Chief, when I give you the floor, please introduce the leadership that came with you as well presenting today. So Chief Story, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good to be here again. So all the way to my left, Assistant Chief Kenny Howell, Assistant Chief of Police. To my immediate left, Perry-Ann Mendez, she's our fiscal manager here at the PD. And to my right, Lieutenant Laura Trzynski, our commander of planning and accreditation. We'll go through the PowerPoint presentation. First slide is the mission statement. It is the mission of the Hartford Police Department to work collaboratively with the community to maintain public safety, improve quality of life, and instill pride in those who live, work, and visit the capital city. The police department shall remain dedicated to serving the Hartford community with impartiality and professionalism, and to maintaining the trust of the community through accountability and transparency. The department is committed to continuous improvement using the most progressive and effective training, technology, and evidence-based approaches, all of which is supported by our budget. The next slide is difficult to see. It is our organizational chart. We can certainly provide a larger version of it that's easier to see, but at the top, there's the Chief of Police. Right below that is the Assistant Chief of Police, and then we have 4 main divisions within the department. The Patrol Division, which is headed by a Deputy Chief, that contains both the regular uniformed Patrol Division and the Community Services Bureau. We have a Deputy Chief over Administrative Services, along with a Captain. That is our support services and administrative services, including IT, Quartermaster, Fleet, Court Support, Property Room, Records Division, Crime Analysis, things like that. The Deputy Chief of Professional Standards also has a Captain in Professional Standards. That's our Police Academy, Planning and Accreditation Division, our Backgrounds Division, our Internal Affairs Division, Personnel, all of our Professional Standards units. The last Deputy Chief is over Investigative Services, the Detective Bureau, commonly known. There's also a Captain over that as well. That's Vice Intelligence and Narcotics, Special Investigations Division, Major Crimes Division, and the Crime Scene Division. That's the general breakdown of the PD. 2024 highlights. Obviously, our biggest highlight is our continued work to stabilize our staffing numbers and increase our staffing numbers. Our current staffing is at 378 sworn officers. That's 108 officers short of our full staffing. This is a net decrease of 1 officer since this time last year. We've seen our resignations and our attrition numbers slow, which I'll explain a little bit more detail. But our hiring is just not keeping up with our standard attrition numbers. These are challenges associated. These challenges contribute to our high overtime expenditures, which we'll talk a little bit more about as well. The challenges in hiring are attributed to low applicant numbers, and applicants not showing up, and applicants being eliminated for disqualifying events that are discovered in their backgrounds, psychologicals, and polygraphs. The minority staffing number is 42.06%. It's an increase since the same time last year, and 15% of our overall officers are female. So our attrition numbers in 2024, year to date, we've lost 11 officers, and we have 7 in an academy class right now. So as you can see, we're losing there. In 2023, we lost 23 officers. Our attrition number was 23, and we put 19 through the academy. The good news is that 23 number is the lowest number we've seen in several years. The year before, in 2022, we lost 48 officers. In 2021, we lost 41 officers. So as long as we can continue to put classes in and continue to increase the number of folks in those classes, we're hoping to be able to crawl back up over that 400 number. So as I said, these staffing numbers affect our overtime budget, patrol overtime that covers our regular days off, our sick time, our injured time, FMLA time, military time, vacation, holiday, compensatory time, and all accrued time off usage totaled $2.2 million, which was 68% of our overtime budget. So our overtime budget is being driven by vacancies created by those areas I just mentioned. Community Services Bureau comes in at the second highest rate of overtime. This is our city park events, our community meetings, our council meetings, our elections, our religious events, Domingo, our restaurant and club details, all of the special events that pop up that we have to cover that are not otherwise funded outside of the PD. That's 24% of our overtime budget, $1.2 million. I'm sorry, that combined, our CSB combined with our regular day off and sick coverage equates to 68% of our overtime budget. Our vacancies are 44 and our special events are 24. So those two combined account for 68% of our vacancies. The remaining 32% of our overtime comes from Detective Bureau callbacks, operations, special teams, special events, concerts, yard goats games, things like that, that weren't included in the first two categories. Our key drivers in losing people in the hiring process are folks that don't show up for the agility test. We do exit interviews. We reach out to these folks to try to get them to come in, find out why they're not showing up. Our most common reason is they just don't feel like they're ready and they're in good enough shape to pass, so they just didn't come. We work with those folks in both nutrition and exercise throughout the year. Our recruitment division runs classes at night to help work out and get prepared for that stuff. So we're continuing to work to get these folks ready to make sure that they can pass the tests. These low staffing numbers, we have 84 total shifts that we fill in a day on day shift, evening shift, and midnight shift. Of those, we're averaging 28 that we have to fill through overtime, and 6 or so per week have to be filled by either ordering an officer in or holding an officer over for a double, because we just don't have the staff to fill those positions. We have officers assigned to regular assignments, and then we have a relief list. Our relief list on day shift, just as an example, is our ideal relief list number so that we can fill the positions on officers' regular days off or when they take vacation. That number is 28. The minimum number to cover our staffing without using overtime is 24, and we are currently at 0. On evening shift, same, 28, 24, and we have 6. On midnights, 28, 24, and we have 18. We shift our relief list officers to midnight shift because it's the toughest shift to fill with overtime. So if we can fill those vacancies with officers that are already assigned to midnight shift, it works out better. But all said, we're down 60 from our ideal staffing in our relief lists, and that's what drives our overtime. Next slide. So Academy Class 2023-2 graduated just this last month. 8 total Hartford PD recruits. 1 recruit was a Hartford resident. 50% of the recruits were minorities, including all female, and all females were minorities as well. And 25% of the recruits were female. Academy Class 24-1 started in March. 7 Hartford recruits, 2 recruits are Hartford residents. 57% of the recruits are minorities, including females. They are also minorities as well. And 14% of the recruits are female. Moving on to crime data, 2023 ended with a total 5% decrease in crime compared to 2022. That was a 0% change in homicide, a 24% increase in rape, which we'll talk about a little bit, 6% decrease in robbery, 22% decrease in aggravated assault, 28% decrease in shooting victims, 12% decrease in burglary, 23% decrease in larceny, and a 99% increase in auto theft. The auto theft increased numbers is something that's being seen across the country and across the state. These are largely our Kia and Hyundais represent 50% of our stolen cars in the city, and they're stolen predominantly with that TikTok challenge by juveniles. 48% of our arrests for auto theft are juveniles, and 50% of our cars stolen are Kia and Hyundai. So those numbers doubling are a direct result of the Kia Hyundai issue. We saw our shooting numbers decrease over the last 3 years. Last year, with 98 total shooting victims, that was the lowest number we have seen in a decade. And that was, as I said earlier, a 28% decrease. Year to date, some of this information is a little bit dated because of when we presented when we put together the presentation. But year to date, we're 20% down in shooting victims compared to those numbers that were historic last year. We're another 20% down this year so far. We've had 16 shootings in 2024 compared to 20 in 2023 and 26 in 2022. We're also down almost 40%, 38% from 2 years ago. So far in 2024, this is our year-to-date information. Again, this information is a couple CompStat periods old. We went from a 0% increase in homicide to today we are sitting at a 33% decrease in homicides. We have 4 year-to-date this year compared to 6 last year, compared to 10 2 years ago. So we're down 60% in homicide from 2 years ago. A 77% decrease in rape, as we saw. The rape numbers in 2023 went up. It was one of the crime categories that we kept very close eye on. We had no patterns. They were predominantly not stranger sexual assaults, and there's no facts that we can attribute to why that number increased that year. But so far, we're 77%. Actually, as of today, we're 80% down in sexual assault so far this year and rape this year. 16% down in robbery, 11% down in aggravated assault. We're actually up to 20%, as I mentioned, down in shooting victims. 50% decrease in burglary, 4% decrease in larceny, and we're actually at a 14% increase in auto theft. We've seen some improvement in the auto theft numbers versus a few weeks ago. Calendar year 2024, compared to 2 years ago, again, those numbers are even more significant. 60% decrease overall in homicide, 62% decrease in rape, 11% decrease in robbery, 38% decrease in aggravated assault, 38% decrease in shooting victims over 2 years ago, 53% decrease in burglaries, and 28% decrease in larceny, and again, we're down to a 99% increase versus 113 when this was printed in auto theft. So all in all, numbers are trending in the right direction. Still a lot of work to be done. Another significant indicator is our ShotSpotter activations. For January, we had 118 versus 183 last January. That's down 36%, or down 65 incidents For February, we're down 36%, or 53 incidents. For March, we're down 28% in ShotSpotter activations. And so far for April, we are down 60% in ShotSpotter activations. So another indicator that we use to kind of track where our shooting numbers are going. Highlights, a CALIA accreditation. Last year, we went through an assessment in the summer and the fall, and in November, went out to Seattle to do our final examination, if you will, for national CALIA accreditation, and the department was awarded national accreditation for its first time in its history. As we know, 2 years ago, we were awarded state accreditation for the first time in our history. Our policies are continuing to being updated, and we'll talk about what that looks like and what that means for some of our future endeavors as we get further into the presentation. Our partners, still leveraging our partnerships with both the community, our other city agencies, now the Office of Violence Prevention, Siobhan Campbell and company, it's going to be another great resource for us. Our HEART team, our Interval House, that's our domestic violence partner to do DV prevention and risk assessments, and also our law enforcement agency partners as well. We'll talk a little bit about a core case that we recently did as we get a little further into the presentation as well. Our strategic initiatives, these are actually memorialized in the annual report this year. If you haven't seen it, it's on our website. It's worth a look. It's dedicated to the memory of Detective Bobby Garton. We lay out a 5-year strategic plan in that document. So hopefully that'll lay the groundwork for some as the new chief comes in, so they can take a look, he or she can take a look at that and see what endeavors they want to pursue and which they don't, but at least it'll give some kind of guidance as we transition leadership here in the PD. Strategic initiative number 1 is officer wellness. We actually just contracted with a professional wellness audit. We teamed up and included the fire department and ES&T. So this is kind of a first responder public safety wellness audit. A lot of stressors in frontline workers now, and I think we're still seeing the toll from COVID. So this was, I think, we were able to get this through using ARPA funds to bring somebody in to really look at work-life balance, how our firefighters, dispatchers, and officers are able to handle the stressors of this type of work. Again, that just kicked off, a few weeks ago. We're in the process right now of getting all of our policies and procedures to that person to take a look at. The name of the consulting company is Justice One. Regularly reviewing our officer wellness protocols and our equipment and what we're using to make sure that the folks that are doing the work are well supported. And again, the work-life balance and in the goal of stabilizing our officer retention rates. Creating a data platform for increased communication, transparency, and accountability. And again, this is a kind of a 5-year plan. It's detailed a little bit more in the annual report, but we're basically looking at more ways, more mechanisms to have public-facing data. We're working on I started years ago, I think when I first came in as chief, we worked with Laura to start a forward-facing policy program. Now that we are accredited and all the policies are up to date, we are looking to put all policies that can be legally released out on the website, so people can just go there and get them from there. Ones that have sections that have to be redacted, we're in the process of redacting those. Those are just predominantly tactical issues that we don't want out in kind of the public space. But generally, most of our policies are releasable and they will be available on the website. Also, we want to try to push out some data that is particularly of interest to the community, like our use of force data, our pursuit data, our crime data, our motor vehicle stop data, our citizen complaint data, and anything else that the public shares with us that would be interesting to see. on the website. So this, again, is a 5-year plan. Some of this requires some back-end technology to make sure that it's updated on a regular basis. But that is strategic initiative number 2. Excuse me. Maintaining and expanding our strategic partnerships and collaborations. This includes the HART team. We all know how successful that has been, the work that we do in conjunction with them. Supporting our community outreach team and our community policing initiatives, responding to crime trends in partnership with other agencies, both city agencies, nonprofits, and some of our federal partners. We started working very closely with the state's attorney's office recently, and just did a press announcement on a CORA case that we did. That's corrupt organizations and racketeering activity. That's what CORA stands for. We use this GMS, Get Money STEPA's group, as a target for that, made 13 arrests. These are some of our most violent individuals. Took about 11 months to put that case together in conjunction with the state's attorney's office, but those are some extremely dangerous people that, due to a unique way of approaching this case, it's almost like the equivalent of the RICO statutes for the federal government, but this is a state-level investigation that was very successful. Also working with the Board of Education to, we've for years we injected officers into schools. That didn't prove to be the best way of doing business. Now we don't have SROs or school resource officers in schools, but we still want to partner with the Board of Education to make sure that we're allowing for positive interactions between our officers and our youth beyond just PAL and some of the things that we've had going on for years. Number 4, diversity and inclusion initiatives, enhancing the diversity of the department. We're looking to introduce some diversity and inclusion training as part of our onboarding process, which has not been done in the past. Continuing to aggressively recruit. Our recruitment division has really come up with some great ideas. I think it was Walgreens recently that laid off about 200 employees, and our recruitment division reached out to them and were able to get a list of all of the employees and contact information, and they called all of them and to see if they wanted to go from Walgreens to the Hartford Police Department. It'll remain to be seen if any come over, but a great idea by Steve Austin and his crew, and they continue to think of new ways to try to get out there and recruit more folks. Also leveraging our fraternal organizations, our Hispanic Officers Association, our Guardians, our Power, Italian Officers Emerald Society, to try to help with some of those recruitment and retention initiatives as well. Number 5, improving public safety. Number 1 on this list is continuing to be visible and aggressively enforce our traffic laws, even with some of our staffing challenges. That continues to be probably one of the number 1 complaints that we get in community meetings is speeding, stop signs, red lights, quality of life issues like loud mufflers, quads and ATVs, etc. So really focusing in on that is one of our priorities. As far as OUI checkpoints and click it or ticket initiatives, we continue to lead the state every year in those numbers. Our traffic division does a phenomenal job. Public service announcements, we're really with this Kia Hyundai issue, we're trying to leverage information sharing and getting more information out about ways to harden targets, whether it's giving out clubs, which we've been doing since the onset of this Kia Hyundai issue. We have been working closely with Kia and Hyundai on a fix for this USB issue that can start these cars with very little effort. We do have an initiative planned where we're going to bring them into the city in an area where we have room, and they are going to provide on-the-spot fixes for Kias and Hyundais, and we'll get that information out as we start to get a date. Honestly, we were really going to do it down where Cirque du Soleil is, so that is a little occupied right now. But that's an initiative that you'll see coming in the summer months, where we're going to partner with the auto industry to try to fix some of these problems that prevent the crimes from occurring in the first place. And then continuing to use intelligence-driven methods to be specific. Our goal is to not be out there arresting everybody. We want to really focus on the individuals that are having the most negative impact on our community. Our budget comparison, as we can see here, 2024 adopted, including grants, total of $55 million, 55.7 million. Fiscal year 2025 recommended is 56 million. So a percent change really overall in the general fund of 3.4%. And that really breaks down to predominantly to our general wage increases that were negotiated in the contract. That accounts for 1.5 million of that, or 3.5% of the total increase is the GWI. We're also shifting 10 officers from COPS grant funding onto the general fund. That's $657,000. 15 officers are falling down a tier in grant funding so that we have a higher share rate for those 15 officers this coming fiscal year. That's $145,000. A position for system analyst that wasn't hired until after the fiscal year, so that was added back into our budget at $76,000. So that's where these increases come from. The majority of it comes from our GWI from the union contract. Budget highlights and areas of focus. Really, it is about hiring and retaining police officers, diverse police officers, and replenishing our ranks in the department to get back to a place where we can operate with lower overtime, less holdovers, less order-ins, and operate the way that we should operate with adequate staffing. We're looking to put in a class of 25 recruits for the first half of this fiscal year and 25 recruits for the second half of the fiscal year. Hopefully, we'll see some Walgreens employees in there. Police staffing comparison, composition, residency, City of Hartford resident 5%, non-resident 95%. Our race and ethnicity of that 42% I mentioned earlier is 23% Hispanic, 12% African American, 63% white, and 2% other. And we are 85% male and 15% female. And that is it for the PowerPoint presentation. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Chief Doty, for this presentation. I'm going to open up the floor for my council colleagues for any statement or questions. How we're going to do this, we're going to have 2 rounds of questions. On the first round, I ask my colleagues to only ask between 1 to 2 questions, just to give a lot of time for everybody to ask their questions. And then on the second round, then we'll ask any remaining follow-up questions. I'll start to my right and see if there's anyone that would like to ask any questions or make any statements. Anybody? Council Assistant Majority Leader Clark? Councilwoman Rosado.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Chief, I really don't have any questions. You know, when I have questions, I sent you over an email, but I just want to congratulate you, your department. I'm really excited about the recent arrests, and to learn that that took place in the making over 6 or 7 months. And so, and thank you for addressing the SUVs. As you know, we've had some residents reach out to my office, and I forwarded you those emails, and we've been able to provide them with the answers, and they've been very satisfied. So, you know, I'll say it on the record, sad to see you leave. I know you're an amazing chief, and you've done a lot for this city, and we've come a long way. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Couldn't do it without your support.
All right. Assistant Majority Leader Clark.
Thank you. Chief, thank you for your presentation. Yeah, I'm having a little bit of
I'm laughing with you.
issue. Thank you, as you always do, you know.
Yes, sir.
Sure, last budget, you're probably relieved, a little bit maybe, but you all have put in some great work. We have worked with each other for a long time. Just wanted to highlight regarding the recruiting. So how many, I know you mentioned you budgeted for 25 for 24 and 25 for 25. How many is that an actual number, or is that more of an estimate that you're looking to get?
That's what we're looking for. I mean, to be quite honest with you, I'll give you, you heard the numbers, right, from last year. We had one class of 8 and one class of 7, and I think we asked for a class of 25 and a class of 25. So, we're looking to try to put in, as many as we can. And, in years past, and when I say years past, probably 10 years ago, you'd have a list of 150 people, and you would take, 30, and that was where we really had to cap it, right? Because we didn't want to put 50 in if we're only budgeted for 25 or 30. In the last 5 or 6 years, we take everyone that's able to pass, and as you know, that's passing all the disqualifiers that were mandated to look at by the state. But I can't tell you a year that we have been able to put through. I think the closest we came was maybe 22 recruits. Let's see, historical classes, 24-1 was 7, 23 was 7. The first class in 2023 was 12. So 2022-1 had 22 people in it. 2020-1 had 15. 2019-2 had 15. So as I go back all the way to 2016, that's as far back as I've got my records here, we've never had a class of 25. 18, 22, 17, 20, 16, 13. So our goal is to try to hit that number, but I guess the short answer is, yeah, that's an estimate, and it's a wishful one.
Okay, thank you for that. I asked Chief Barco last week when he came regarding his thoughts on the Public Safety Academy, given the understanding that we have some recruiting to do. I know he was concerned about the levels, and also regarding the fire cadet program. Can you speak to the police cadet program? Are you experiencing any issues with trying to bring cadets on board in a competitive wage?
Yeah, so the academy is a great idea. I think as you probably know, we did our first Citizens Academy last year, and it was a great success. In fact, I met with somebody today that is looking to maybe come on board with the department part-time to do some social media stuff and to do some recruitment stuff. And that was one of the members of that academy. I think those academies are great to let people know what we really do. Some people think it's just a far more complex job than it needs to be, and I think that we're losing a lot of good people because they watch the news and they look at the legislative stuff that comes out and they think it's just a overly cumbersome, dangerous job, and it can be, but it's very fulfilling too. So I think the academy is a great job. But to answer your second question, yeah, we're struggling with cadets just as much as we're struggling with recruits. We have 10, positions for cadets. I think right now we have 3 cadets, and we're constantly, HR is great about keeping these processes open. Marlene and her team, keep these processes open for us. So we're constantly bringing in people, and either they get hired up by another company before we're able to get all the background checks done and stuff, or another department. That's common too. A department that may pay a little more. It might be a suburb department where they feel like there'll be less work. In my opinion, it's less fulfilling work, but so yeah, we're struggling there too. So I think a collaboration would be great.
What does it look like on what it would take to put that whole collaboration together?
I don't think it would be overly difficult. I mean, both the police department and the fire department run academies, right? We did the Citizens Academy at night. So I can talk to Chief Barco, but I really don't think that would be, overly complex. We did have the fire and the police cadets, I think it was last year, that went to a camp together, and it was great. They got along really well. I think some people decided, fire wasn't for them and police was, and some people decided police wasn't for them and fire was. So I think it worked out very well. So I would be in support of that, and I think we could do it relatively quickly.
I asked Chief Barco to get me some numbers. Could you get some numbers together as to, from a estimated budget standpoint, what that looks like?
Sure.
Thank you. That concludes my comments, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Bilodeau?
Good evening. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you all for your service to the city. Just a question on lower level than the cadets. I know you have the Police Explorer program. How many do you currently have in the Police Explorer program, and is it common to see them rise to the level of cadet?
It's not as common as I'd like to see. The Explorer program really does very well. Sergeant Nicole Mordashevitz runs it. They go to an academy, for a week once a year. They participate in these competitions. They're prepared to go to the next step. We probably have about, I'd say, mid-20s right now in Police Explorers. And those, many of those, probably a third of those are also involved in the PAL program. And those are the pipelines that we're trying to create to then become Hartford police officers. We lose a lot along the way, whether, they find other career paths or get themselves in trouble and, don't make it. The numbers, if I've got 25 explorers, you'll probably see like 3 or 4 that will then progress to be paid as cadets. I've talked about it before. I think we have to look at that cadet program and try to incentivize it more. When I was a cadet, when I got hired, that time counted towards my retirement. I was able to retire earlier because my cadet service counted. Somewhere along the way, we lost that, and it doesn't count anymore. Also, the pay for it is as inflation drives up, minimum wage and the amount of money people get paid for other jobs, it becomes competitive, and we're losing people to other careers. I think we really have to revisit the cadet program, probably both on the fire and on the police side, and try to bring it back to where it was back in the day, where it truly was something that people were excited to get involved in. They could make ends meet, they could pay rent, and they truly start their career.
Thank you.
Majority Leader Rossetti?
Thank you. Hi, Chief.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
First of all, I want to thank you for the last 4 years, at least, when I've been involved with you. It was a wild ride during this time, so really appreciate your efforts. But really want to thank the men and women of the police department. Really doesn't go unnoticed that they serve us every day, and we appreciate that. So I want to go to page 23-1 in the budget book, the strategic plan initiatives, and ask a couple of questions on those.
This one?
Do you have that there?
Sure.
Okay. So the first one is, and you kind of touched on it, but I wanted to go into it a little further, where you say in the bullet 2, expand efforts to recruit Hartford residents as well as candidates that are racially and gender diverse. What are the existing efforts? I know you talked about Walgreens, but what are the existing efforts, and how successful have they been, particularly when we look at the ratio of Hartford residents as it stands right now?
I think residents is tough because we, even when we get residents and if you notice, we have 5% residents that are actively Hartford police officers. But even though we only had a class of 7, one of them was a resident, and we had a class of 8 where 2 of them were residents. Once they get on the job, they tend to leave. From a police officer perspective, what we hear is that, they don't want to police and then, feel that them and their family may be in danger by living in the city that they police because they'll run into somebody that they arrest. It's not just a trend here. It's a trend in a lot of places, especially inner cities, where officers will get hired. Now they have a good salary and a good benefits package, and they can work overtime, and they end up buying a house outside of the city. Again, I think there's probably, ways to incentivize people to stay here. But that would be a change we'd have to make.
What are the efforts to recruit?
So the efforts are, again, we put them up every year, from predominantly, black colleges to, I moved recruitment to out of the academy and into community outreach starting the first of this year. So now our recruitment division works with our faith-based officers and our unhoused outreach, and they work under the same umbrella. That's where Katie now is too. We're using Katie as a recruitment tool. So it's an experiment, having our recruitment division and our community outreach division under the same place, but I think it makes sense. But there's a very detailed list on our website of all the recruitment efforts that are underway, from school-based programs to religious-based programs to radio station events, work fairs, job fairs. HR also does job fairs where they're promoting it on a regular basis. As I just said, really trying to leverage social media and just cast a wider net. The classes that we are putting in are some of the most diverse that we've ever seen. I think it was a year ago or 2 years ago that we were at a 78% racial and ethnic minority recruit class. We've never seen numbers like that. So I think it's working, but for a lot of reasons, we're just not getting the number of applicants. And that's not specific to us. If I had, a magic fix for it, I appreciate the recruitment divisions, thinking outside the box and looking at places that are laying off. But it's challenging. But there is an entire section, it's actually statutorily mandated, that we put up our recruitment and retention efforts, and it's on the website, and you can look at specifically all the things we do, and if anyone has ideas that go beyond that, we're always open
Do we
to hear.
have a 5-year look back on how that's actually equated to an increase? I mean, are we doing the same things and getting the same result? I guess that's...
Well, the answer is no. We're not doing the same thing. I mean, I just gave one example of ways we're doing things differently. But, two heads are better than one. If folks have ideas of where they think we can find, more recruits, if you go onto the website and you look at the recruitment and the retention plan, you can probably go back further than 5 years. Each class is listed based on, the racial and ethnic breakdown of the classes. You can watch those numbers increase, especially with women. Law enforcement as a whole has been much more successful for some reason in recruiting women than they have been in the past. But those are the minutia of that is all on the website under the recruitment division.
Thank you. Again, 23-1, strategic plan initiatives. And I just want to do one more, so I won't. Explain to me what it means to use technology such as street cameras to modernize and supplement law enforcement. What exactly does that mean?
So as one of the technologies I mentioned here was ShotSpotter. So that allows us to, we found out when we went to ShotSpotter that only about 18 to 20% of shots fired calls were being called, shots fired incidents were being called in. So once we got ShotSpotter up and running, we realized that a lot of people are hearing these shots going off and they're not even calling the police. That could mean that someone is shot and hurt in a neighborhood, and we don't know to respond to that. We don't know to get fire there, to get EMS there. So ShotSpotter is an example of that. Now, expanding that allows something like, ShotSpotter to initiate or inform our cameras that a shooting incident has occurred, so that our cameras can be looking for a fleeing vehicle, a fleeing suspect, things like that. So intelligence-led technology is how that works. That's a force multiplier when we're able to, we went from, okay, an incident happened, let's go back and let's review the footage, to now having real-time analysts that are sitting there and they're listening to the call come in, and it could be a call, let's say, for a domestic violence at 253 High Street. Obviously, that's the police department's address. We hope that doesn't happen, but what we're going towards is having that real-time crime center be able to look up and see, is there a pistol permit holder at that address? What are the other incidents that have been called in at that address? If we've got dog complaints barking, we know there's a dog there, so we can let the officer know that before they get there. Just using technology to better inform our response and to get better results in both saving lives and in solving crime.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Council President Surgeon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Chief, you were a police officer for numerous years, and then you came back as the chief. So how many years have you served this city?
28 in June. June 10th will be 28 years.
Thank you. Sincerely. You know, it's a tough job to be a police officer, and not too many of us as public cut out for it. So even though, you know, we meet the greatest critic, but the reality that you're actually hanging in there with us. So thank you very much for your service. More than anything else, and the men and women who work for you, thank them so very much that, you know, some of the community members may yell and scream, but the reality is we couldn't do it without the safety and the service you provide for us.
Thank you. That's what families do. Sometimes we yell and scream at each other, but works out in the end.
Well, you know what? That's how families are.
That's it.
You know, we yell and scream at each other, but we still love each other.
True.
So thank you. Couple of things, Chief, and staying with Councilwoman Majority Leader Rossetti in the book. Couple of things. I'm going to ask my two questions so I can come back from our remaining follow-up questions. In the significant features, you talked about is a juvenile specialist moving from the police department to family, children, and youth?
Yes.
Is it a police officer or is it?
No, that was a civilian position that was probably created maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. And Manny Maldonado, I don't know if you remember Manny. He was our juvenile specialist.
Okay.
It was good work, but it was kind of like work without a home, right? He started in Special Investigations Division. You know, it was a challenge for him to be there. He wasn't able to kind of do the juvenile work that the administration envisioned for him to do out of the police department. So then he moved over to City Hall, you know, so I think that was kind of a thought in process by the administration. And this year, you know, it was moved out of the police department. It's still interacting with the police department. That position is not filled, but when it's filled, it would still interact with our department when it comes to juveniles. And it would be a great position to have filled right now, especially with the auto theft issues that we're having with juveniles. But I think that was just a move to get that position out of the police department, you know, and over on the City Hall side of things.
Okay, thank you. And also, there's an increase support for Interval House?
Yes. So that $50,000 was a business case. We funded. So we have a specialist from a caseworker from Interval House embedded in the police department. It was one of the first, I guess, deals that I brokered when I became chief. Mary Jane Foster came over and pitched the idea. I said, yeah, let's do it. And we've had Ada over in the police department since then. So it's been 5 years now. She works in major crimes where our domestic violence detectives work out of. And she's been a tremendous asset in making sure things don't fall through the cracks, providing services and the like. Funding becomes an issue for groups like Interval House. And 2 years ago, well, it would have been last fiscal year, you know, Mary Jane came to myself and COO Montanez and was looking to see if we could fund an additional position. You know, domestic violence surged really during COVID, and we thought maybe it would go down, and that has not happened. So she was really looking for another position. She didn't have the funding to fund it, but it would be focused in Hartford, that would work out of Interval House. We provided her with the $50,000 last year, with her coming back again this year, kind of looking for that. Again, that was a decision by the administration, by Thea, you know, to just put it into the budget.
So basically, this 50,000 is from last year and it's going to continue to this year also.
Correct. So it's the same position, same person from last year that we are now funding this year. It looks as though we're going to make the commitment to continue to fund that, which I fully support. And the idea was, let's just put it in the budget so that we don't have to keep, adding it on every year.
And just one last question, this $54 million, how many full-time staffing is this for?
That's 486 when you count the grant-funded 378. What's the number without grant-funded? I think it's 378. I'm sorry, not 378. 472 if you take out grant-funded.
So the 54 million is for 472 positions,
Correct.
not including grant funding.
Not including grant funding, right?
Oh, no, because the only reason I asked on page 23.3, I was trying to figure out, is it 517, 522?
So this is a unique situation where we get the COPS grant funding every year. And the COPS grant funding is additional officers, not supplanting officers, right? So this number is including civilian, it's including those grant positions, even if the officer goes from the grant to the general fund. So that's total positions. When we say 472, those are sworn officers. It includes me and the assistant chief. It doesn't include all of our civilian staff. It doesn't include, records. It doesn't include all that other stuff.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief.
Councilman Gale.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. I want to pick up on some questions that Councilman Clark was asking. And looking at specifically at the police academy budget, it appears that you've built in a fairly considerable increase. It looks like last budget year was about $3.5 million, and the request this year is $6.2 million. That's a $2.7 million increase, if I'm reading these things correctly. So and you've talked a lot about trying to beef up the academy and improve the academy. Just wondering, what is it that we are looking to do with this increased budget in the police academy?
So in the past, the vacancies, the vacant police officer positions were kind of spread out into the patrol division of the budget. All the vacant positions are now in the academy. So all that reflects is vacancies. So we have 378 officers right now. We're short 108. Those 108 vacancies are now fall under the academy in the budget. It's just easier to track them that way.
Okay, so it doesn't represent any.
We have the same number of staff in the academy today as we had last year.
Okay, so and you talked about the when you were discussing how to attract more people to the academy, how to get those numbers where you want them to be. You talked about the cadet program and mentioned that at least two things that you thought could change with the cadet program that might make it more attractive were pay and having service as a cadet count towards your pension. Where in this budget would I find the cadet pay?
I would have to find them. I can probably answer that question in email because I would have to find. My guess is going to be that they're in the academy, but I have to look into in Munis. 039 career development, but their individual salary, I'd have to look at like the Munis breakdown of it to give you what their individual salary is.
Yeah, I'm just looking for the general budget figure in our.
039 it's gonna fall under career development.
Okay, now, that includes that career development includes funding for other programs
Correct.
besides just the cadet?
Yeah, that's not going to give you their, their individual yearly salary or anything like that. I'd have to pull that out to give it to you.
If you could, email it after.
Yep.
I'd be interested to know what the total annual expense for the cadets is. Now, are those salaries set by union contract, or are they set by administration or by council?
I do not believe they are set by union contract. They are not, cadets aren't in the union, so I think they're set by the administration. I remember previous administration, we had, I think, 15 vacancies. We could never fill them. We reduced the 15 vacancies to 10 vacancies and used that money to divide it between 10 cadets and essentially give them a raise, because we could never fill those 15 positions anyway. So that's how we ended up at 10. So I think that can be adjusted. I don't think they're, I don't know what they would be, I don't know if you'd call them like, unclassified, non-union, but they're not union employees. So I don't think that's set by a contract. I think we could adjust that.
And then moving on towards the concept of adding service as a cadet to your pension if you move into the uniform service. Is that also something that can be done by administration, or is that subject to union contract at that point?
I don't think it was a union contract. I think Deb is here. Was she here? Oh, Deb left. But Deb Carbello had, when that change was made, she was part of writing that up. Again, they don't fall under the union contract, so I think, that might be as simple as stroke of a pen. I could be wrong. It would really be an HR question. But I don't see how that would be impacted by the union contract. But, if you get a cadet, when in the current retirement system, you can't collect your pension until you're 55, right? So if you get hired as a cadet and you're 18 years old, so you could retire after 25 years and you'd be, 43? So, I think that's the concern, is that the younger that we kind of get these folks in, the bigger that gap becomes. And what we saw with the cadets, when we moved when there was a time where you could collect your pension as soon as you retired, if you were 45, if you were 42, if you were 48. We moved that to 55. So if you're a cadet and you get in at the ground floor, and even if we say that time counts towards your pension, one of the issues that we saw was that a cadet could do a 25-year career, retire at 43, and not be able to collect their pension for 12 years. And some of these cadets were going to departments like Middletown and East Hartford because they were still young. Now they were certified police officers at 21 years old. They could go there. They have a 20-year retirement, and you can collect the minute that you leave. So that's where we became less competitive. But if you can start your pension at 18 years old and start, that clock ticking, I do think that's an incentive. It may not be the only incentive, but it was one that drew me to the cadet program for sure. There's probably other things that we could do, including pay, but that's probably an HR question, how exactly we would change that back and what it would take.
And I take it that's still the case, that there are communities around us that have not moved to the 55 for collecting your pension.
Oh yeah, that's definitely the case. I don't know of too many police departments that have an age restriction on when you can collect your pension. A lot of police departments went to 25 years. That was a big controversy, 5 or 6 years ago. It was like the sky was falling because you had to go 25 years instead of 20. I was on the 20-year plan. But most departments, the day you retire, it's a hazardous duty pension, and on that day, you can collect that pension.
So last question in this subject area. Is this phenomenon unique to Hartford, the inability to recruit officers? Or is this
No.
something that's more of a statewide, nationwide problem?
It's a nationwide issue. It's certainly a statewide issue. I've been in negotiations with the other cities that have their own academy. Bridgeport is a little bit of a stretch because it's kind of far away, but New Haven, Waterbury, New Britain, the chiefs and I have been talking about running like a rotational academy. So instead of, an average recruit process for a police officer can take, 6 months because you got to get through the written, the physical agility, the oral board, and then we get the packets, and you have to do a polygraph, you have to do a psychological, you have to do a complete background that includes a lot of steps that are state mandated. And other towns are working with smaller numbers, and they're coming in and they're poaching those individuals before we can get them in the academy. So what we're trying to do with the other major cities is run our academies on a timed rotation where if we get 4 or 3 or 4 employees that are ready to go, like we can dump them into another academy. So New Haven might send me 2 or 3. In the graduation that we just had, we had half Hartford, half Waterbury. So we're trying to come up with like a kind of a plan where the cities can leverage each other's academies. So instead of waiting for 10 or 15 to be ready, meanwhile you're losing 2, 3, 4 to other towns or to other occupations. When we get 3 or 4 whose packets are ready to be signed off on, we hire them, send them to New Haven, send them to New Britain, send them to Waterbury, and they do the same with us. We end up with a more kind of diverse class, because you're talking about different cities and stuff, and it actually kind of works out pretty well. Those folks stay friends their entire career. And when they have cases in these other cities, they work closely together. There's a lot of benefits to it. So we're working on trying to, get our act together and get organized and do it that way. But it's a national issue, has been for the better part of 3 years.
Thank you, Mr.
Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
And all. Just first, sort of a clarifying question. In the presentation on a couple pages, you said, like on page 5 of your presentation, you said 57% of recruits were minorities, including all females. Does that mean that 57% includes both racial and ethnic minorities and women? You follow
So
me?
the answer in both of these classes is yes. So our females are also racial and ethnic minorities.
Oh.
That's the reason that we did it that way.
So, in other words,
There's
of
no
the
white
women-
females.
All of the women who were in that class were racial and ethnic minorities.
Right.
It's not that you're counting
In
women.
both classes.
Right. It's not that you're counting women as minorities per se.
No. We just wanted to show how many were female,
Right.
but in both of these classes, we had no white females. They were all racial and ethnic minorities. So I tried to clarify that as best I could, but I could see where it's confusing.
Yeah, no, I don't know how you could have. It was going to be a little confusing either
Yeah.
way, but now I understand. I appreciate that. And then, totally unrelatedly, and I was trying to find this in the budget, but I didn't on short notice. What do we spend, what's in the budget this year for ShotSpotter? Like what we pay to the company?
Do we have that?
Close to $800,000.
Yeah, I was going to say 800,000 as an estimate, but I can email you the exact number. It breaks into 2 contracts. Our initial, I want to say our initial covered like 2 square miles, and then we did, basically every residence we covered. We're not covering the parks.
The meadows or whatever.
Right. I think it comes out to, 13 total square miles, but it's in 2 contracts. But I can send you the details.
So a question, a follow-up on that one, because you mentioned integrating the ShotSpotter with the cameras, and it just wasn't clear to me how much of what you were saying is stuff we already do and stuff we're intending to do. So when you said, for example, if the ShotSpotter detects a shot at, somewhere, and then the cameras can look for fleeing vehicles, like that's happening now? We have
No.
that integration set up?
No, we have ShotSpotter, we have the cameras, we are integrating, license plate readers with the cameras. Those are our kind of 3 really key technologies that capture vehicle movements and things like that when we have a crime. I have seen integrations where, you know, our cameras are movable, right? So there are times where an incident happens and the camera would have caught it if it had been panned in a slightly different direction, right? But using intelligence to integrate these technologies, I have seen it where a ShotSpotter activation can basically tell the cameras in those areas, okay, everybody look this way, right? So we'll catch a car that's fleeing, you know, even if the camera was, even if it's normal position. You know, we try to leave the cameras in a position where we think is most significant, whether it's a serious a big intersection or whatever it might be. But you don't always have them pointed in the right place, and we don't have people that can be that quick. Automation and technology can do that. We're not doing that yet.
Do we have a sense of when we will be doing that?
I imagine that'll be a budget line item for whoever presents, you know, next year or the year after. It would have to be, it would be a cost. It wouldn't be free.
But not now.
No.
It's a possibility, but not a reality.
It's a possibility. Yeah, it's a possibility. I think it's a good possibility, but you know, again, that there's going to be a vendor. There's going to have to be, you know, it's going to be a cost associated with it.
What, along those lines, and I'll wrap up quickly. I know we're going to do another round. Just in terms of the cameras and operating cameras and them feeding back to that data center, there's a vendor involved in that as well that has an ongoing cost?
Yes, yeah, the cameras themselves come with a cost, and then, you know, there's a storage that is a cost. A lot of that is through MHIS.
So that wouldn't even be in your budget, that
No.
would be in their budget?
Correct.
Do you know offhand what that cost runs? If not, you know.
I don't. I don't.
Yeah, I'll wait till the next round for my other questions.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for everything that the police department does. I always say that the police department is one of those foundational pieces of our society. I wouldn't call Hartford my home if it wasn't that I know that we have a police department that will keep us safe and keep our society, you know, in order to the best of, you know, your ability. I'll go to the presentation, to the strategic initiatives. I don't know if they were put in order, purposely in that order or not, but I do appreciate that the first one is the wellness of the officers. So is it fair to say that all these overtime the officers have had to put, it's a major cause of perhaps morale or the wellness or the work-life balance being disrupted? Is that fair to say?
I think it's definitely fair to say, and I think it's worse today, you know, than it was 6 or 7 years ago. You know, there's a generational difference in desire to work more than 40 hours. You know, I was joking with another chief. We went from hearing grievances because, you know, 10 years ago, officers were saying, I was eligible for that overtime shift and you weren't. And so they were grieving, saying, I should have been called to work it, to now, nobody wants to work it. And they're grieving whether they were the next person that should have been ordered in or not. So I think it's having a more detrimental effect today because our younger generation doesn't like to work as much overtime. And there are exceptions to that rule. I have some young officers that love to go out there and work, whether it's the road construction work or whether it's overtime. But generally speaking, there is not the desire to work that overtime. I think we had a legitimate concern when officers were working doubles voluntarily, you know, 3-4 times a week. You know, that'll wear on you. But when you're doing it voluntarily, it'll wear on you differently than when you're mandated to do it, which is why, you know, I changed 3 or 4 of the policies about how we rotated who gets ordered in, you know, for a period of time. In fact, my whole career, just about until 3 years ago, you would order in from the bottom of the seniority list. So if I was the least senior officer in the department, and we needed to order somebody in, and we know we order in about 6 times or so a week, I would get ordered in, and the 5 officers that were up the ladder from me, being the most junior officer, would get ordered in, and then that list would reset every week. So the same 5 people were essentially getting ordered in until another academy class graduated, We changed that to, we order in the entire patrol division, starting at the least senior and going all the way through to the most senior. So you have a chance of not getting ordered in, maybe once a month, is kind of, but I think it does have an impact, and I think that's why, the wellness assessment is important, and I think it's why it's important that we have to continue to try to, build the ranks up so that we can at least get to a place where, we're sustainable. Number one, because it's fiscally draining to have an overtime budget as high as it is, and number two, because it's definitely wearing on the officers.
Thank you. So, on the count of the sworn officers, the 378 with the 108, with the 108 that you don't currently have, if you do the percentage, 78% to 22%, so you're basically working with between a fifth and a quarter of your force short.
Correct.
And as I was looking at those numbers, I was thinking here, well, if I have a department of 10 people, that's like working with not 10 people, but working with 7 people, somewhere around that range. And I can only imagine, and that's only a small volume, but in the hundreds, I can only imagine, the impact that not having 108 officers can create, especially in the overtime aspect. So following up that line, that's why it's so important, the police academy and these increase in the efforts to recruit more cadets or more potential officers with the 25-25 goal. I did notice though, and I think you probably did answer this question when Councilman Gill asked you this, but I just want to make sure that it transferred to my specific question. When I looked at on the budget book on page 23-3, if I look at the FTEs, there was 2 areas that had the biggest swing of FTEs. The police academy going up from 40-something to 70, 40 to 73, and then the South District going down from 113 to 79, or adopt 82. And I figure, well, that's the transfer of the position from the
Correct.
South District to the police academy. But you mentioned that those are pretty much vacancies
Yes.
that were transferred. So I think that probably almost defeats my question of, is there any impact to the South District by not having those officers that you accounted for in the previous budget? But if those are vacancies, then I assume the answer will be no. Is that correct?
It's correct. I mean, it's just a matter of where you put your vacancies. I think, so for a while it was if an officer retired, let's say, for us, I was a South District officer. If I retired, my vacancy stayed there because that's where I was in the munis system when I left. So the vacancy would just sit there. It made it very difficult for us to find them, like, when we were looking for where all the vacancies were. And I think, it was a good idea to move them into the academy because, one, it gives you a better picture of who you have in the North District, South District, who's in what division, and it puts all your vacancies in one place.
Thank you. Any questions for round 2? Councilwoman? Oh, yes, he'll text me if he needs questions, yeah. Councilwoman Rosado.
Chief, I have a couple of questions. So, were there any departments or programs that were funded by ARPA funds that the police department exhausted and now there's not a budget, or you haven't included it in the budget?
That would be a question for M&B. I know for a fact that we used ARPA for the wellness assessment. There was a pot of that money that fit the wellness assessment, and that was the reason that I thought it was important to engage with fire and EMS as well. I'm sorry, ES&T as well. As far as anything else that was funded at ARPA, you'd have to ask M&B unless they had an answer off the top of their heads, but I'm not sure.
Okay. And then I have one last question. So, page 23-2 of the budget book, and you perhaps answered this before, the K-9 unit, so the actuals for 2023 were 42,000, and the recommended budget is 199,000. Could you tell us why that?
Oh, page 3,
Thank you.
where were you? Are you on page 23-2 or 23-3?
23-2.
-2.
Yeah, line item 35, K-9.
And I'm sorry, what was the question?
So the actual budget for 2023 was $42,000, and the recommended for 2025 is $199,000.
Yeah, so we have a lot of different dogs, right? We have dogs for the bomb squad, we have dogs for vice intelligence and narcotics that are narcotics dogs, we have firearm detection dogs. We shifted all of the dogs. Those dogs would show up in vice intelligence and narcotics,
Okay.
or in, in special teams for the bomb squad dogs. We put all the canines together so we could better track food and the expenditures. So that's why that went up.
Okay, and my last question is just a FYI for like my council colleague, Alex Thomas, because I know Councilwoman Rossetti was asking about, recruitment, but I think it's very beneficial, and I think if you can elaborate, when you have ComStat, that every department comes on there and gives a report, and it's recorded by Hartford Public Access TV. And I know that every department reports, and recruitment does a great job of stating where they were. I mean, I know one time they ran an event even at Walmart, on Flatbush Avenue. So is it on Thursdays?
Yeah, it's the third Thursday of every month is public ComStat. Yep, it's recorded. You don't have to watch it if you're busy at 5:30 on Thursday afternoon. You can, in fact, we only get like 4 or 5 people that watch it live, which kind of made me wonder whether it was worth it. But then we get 250 people that'll watch it on Facebook or some other way. So yeah, it's definitely a good thing to look at. Recruitment does a very thorough presentation on all the efforts that they have, and again, that stuff's online too. And we're always open, to new ideas. I think this month we've got bingo with a cop. It may sound strange, but if we can do it, we'll try it.
Thank you, Chief. I'm all set, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Bilodeau.
Thank you very much. So on Friday, I sat with dispatch and I experienced, what dispatch does every day, and I saw all the calls coming in. It was important to me because I wanted to experience it firsthand, and just watching the diversity of the calls, the backlog that you all experience because of the coverage that you need on a daily basis. I commend you so much in your department for the service that you provide. I experienced the technology that you speak about. It's very advanced. To see the information when a call came in that can be pulled up has to be extremely beneficial to you and your officers. So I think, we can talk about recruitment, and I think we can talk about, how we retain officers and all that, and that is extremely important. But my curiosity comes from, is there a way to shift within the staff, whether it be CSOs or in some other areas, to provide greater patrol coverage to kind of take the burden off of those who are on a given day? Because I know you obviously have to account for that coverage through overtime and other creative ideas. So I was just curious if that was an option.
We've done that. We've adjusted the number of officers that we have assigned to non-patrol functions. Unfortunately, when I sat here 5 years ago, or I think it was 4 years ago, when we talked about things that were important to me, walk beats were one of the things that were important to me. And within my first 6 months, we went from 1 walk beat here in City Hall to 24 walk beats throughout the city. It is not the most efficient way to answer calls for service, but it is a great way to provide people with a sense of security and have folks get to know your officers. And I think it's very traditional. There was recently an article that talked about, cops can't get places when they're on foot. It's true, but when I did the 24 walk beats, we bought bicycles, so they were like walk-ish beats, right? They had bicycles that they could get around pretty quickly on, and I think it's a great program. But it's one of the things that had to go when we needed to answer 911 calls, and we needed to have people not waiting 4 or 5 hours, for to see an officer on a low priority, no injury car accident or whatever it might be. We have, we've all of what's left in the department, to me as the chief, is very important. People, including even the union, had suggested disbanding the traffic division and putting all of them back in patrol so they can answer calls for service. Well, that's great, but that means that everything that the traffic division does now, DUI, OUI arrests, drunk driving arrests, click it or ticket, distracted driving, all of the yard goats and Excel Center, all those things where those are traffic division officers that are experts in moving traffic, would now fall on patrol division. So you would make the department so less efficient. CSO is the same thing. Our folks, council president and I have had some discussions about when I said, hey, your CSO's been there for a decade, maybe it's time for a new person. You would think that the world was coming to an end. The CSO program is so important when it comes to our relationships with the community. So I guess the question becomes, where do you take from, right? We have put out, we changed, here Hyacinth back there, that's another one, that, so we have changed the way the CSOs work a little bit, much to Hyacinth's dismay, and we're sending our district lieutenants to the community meetings, and we're seeing less of our CSOs there because we're trying to get our CSOs to walk the beat a day or 2 days a week so they can engage with the community. And really it's borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. It's not filling the void that people are looking for, but it's doing something. If you see a cop on a bicycle on a nice day, I think that goes a long way, and it certainly is what most people are calling for at the community meetings. So we're doing the best we can to spread out the resources that we have, but I still need detectives in the detective division that solve homicides and robberies and keep some of our most dangerous folks from doing damage. I think we're spread as thin as we can be, and I think we're addressing those as efficiently as we can. I can't see where we could take anyone else from.
Definitely appreciate the answer and the creativity. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Assistant Majority Leader Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Chief, regarding the cameras that are around the city, when were they put in, the C4 cameras?
It was all different. It started, I think, really, the first major one was Sama, right, on Park Street. That was the first street that was really blanketed with cameras. I got to think that was
2011?
2010, 2011-ish, somewhere. And then we've gone little at a time. Senator Fonfara was great with getting us some funding to do, different pockets of the city. Now we're pretty well covered. I think we have about 1,400 camera views across the city, but they all have been integrated in different steps.
Is there a need for an upgrade?
The ones on Park Street, we already had to upgrade. And these, the software and the connectivity was a bigger issue than upgrading the actual hardware. And that's where, MHAS stepped up to get us fiber into as many places as we could, so we could really leverage the ability of these cameras. But as you see, some of these things that we put out, these cameras are still working very well. So, we've got a contract, excuse me, with a vendor, to fix these things as they go down. There's always, a couple cameras that are down on any given week, and we have a schedule to go out there and fix them.
So the infrastructure is intact?
It is.
Technology gets upgraded on an as-needed basis? Yeah,
we really leveraged to get into the game early. There's camera companies out there. There are 2 cameras. I think they're on top of the Travelers building. That are experimental. So some of these companies, because we're so advanced in the real-time crime center world, are coming to us to kind of beta test some of these cameras. And we have been able to leverage those relationships to replace some of the cameras that have kind of gotten outdated. I do think there's going to come a time where a good chunk of money is going to probably need to be spent to, just like we had to upgrade the body cameras, and that wasn't cheap, to upgrade some of these cameras, but we're certainly not there yet.
Okay. The current software that we have, does that have the capability for license plate readers?
We use license plate
You
readers.
do?
Yeah, we have both, the old school LPRs that you saw like stuck to the back of the cars. It
Yeah.
almost looked like some futuristic thing. Now the license plate readers are actually in the cameras. Every in-car camera, the new cameras that are going in the police cars, every in-car camera has a license plate reader module in it, so it can read the license plates in front, the cars that it's passing, and even cars that are passing coming from the other direction. I want to say there's 100 and how many in-car cameras did we get? I want to say 175, but I think that number might be high. That might be, but all of the in-car cameras that we have LPR technology in them, and as we're putting cameras up, we're adding LPR technology to the cameras as well. It's not a standalone anymore, it's built into the camera.
Okay. How many new cars do we have coming in?
And we'll
gonna
see
go to-
what
that's-
you approve in the budget.
Is this part of your budget or CIP?
It's vet, vehicles, what's the E, equipment, vet, and technology.
Yes.
It's part of the vet budget.
Oh, so it's in your budget, okay. You remember how many is budgeted?
I think, so
for?
we have to put in there like what needs to be replaced based on mileage and things like that, and I want to say the ask was for 20, I think.
And I know that, I feel like we had this conversation recently. So the newer cars, if needed, go to the chiefs and then it's passed down because it has a special case if a patrol officer gets a new car. Quite naturally, they do not because of the wear and tear, correct?
Yeah, so what we found is that if you put a brand-new car in patrol, it gets crashed at the same rate as if the car is 3 years old. So our goal in the car process is to put the car somewhere where we won't lose it, at least during the warranty period. That first 3 year, 36,000 miles, we try to get that car, and the car will go to CSOs, so it's not running 24 hours a day. Community service officers, traffic division, administration, our district lieutenants, that's where we try to put the new cars, so we get 3 years out of them. And then when it goes into patrol, it could last a day, or it could last, it could last a couple years. But if we do lose it, at least we got 3 years and 30,000 miles out of it instead of, because we don't have an automatic system where if that car goes away, we get another one. It's not like your insurance, in the PD. If we can't get another insurance company to cover it, we're just out that car. So it's the same way a lot of police departments do it. They also can go to the detective division. They go to places where they can live a somewhat soft life for their first 3 years, and then they go into patrol.
So with this new influx of cars, is that going to now eliminate some of these older models such as the Crown Victorias and
Yeah,
some of those other
we
cars?
had about 2 years worth of cars that we couldn't get upfit because of supply chain issues, and it was silly things like if you notice out there some of the new cars, they don't have a push bumper on the front of the car. That push bumper was designed if a car broke down to be able to move it out of traffic. We very rarely used it in the city, and those things were 8 months back ordered. So we just said we'll do without them. We don't need them. So some things we can say we'll do without. Other things like a prisoner transport cage for the back, we kind of need. Those cars have really just started coming off the line, and some of them are 2022s that are just now getting out there into the field to use. So the answer is yes, they're now getting out there. You'll see more SUVs now. They don't make a sedan anymore. So those older Caprices and Crown Vics are starting to go, are starting to get deadlined, and we're getting some newer cars out there.
Do all our police cruisers have working computers?
All is a stretch, but yes, they all have computers. at any given, much like the cameras at any given time. So it's funny you should ask that. So even the new administrative cars, like my car, Assistant Chief Howell's car, they have computers in them as well. And the goal there is so that as administrators, we can keep an eye on the number of calls holding, and you know, where our resources are allocated. If a council person calls and says, hey, what's going on Blue Hills Avenue, we can just bring it up on the computer and we'll know like how many cars are out there, what they're out there for. So even the admin cars, we used to order like, you know, an admin car with like a velvet interior and like, you know, aluminum wheels. We don't do that anymore. Every car from mine right down, you know, to the patrol cars are all ordered exactly the same. Rubber floors, they're all ready to be patrol cars. When my new car came in a couple weeks ago, and my car I dropped off, and it got a cage put in the back, it got outfitted, and it went out into patrol. So that's the goal, is to keep all the cars identical, so we don't have these, you know, cushy cars floating around that we have nothing to do with them. So when we were running low on cruisers, we were taking admin cars, turning them into patrol cars, and putting them out on the road right away. And that's the goal. I think we're at that place now where almost every one of our cars in our fleet is a patrol-ready vehicle.
Okay, thank you. My last question, red light cameras are coming. How is that infrastructure going to be tied into the police department and C4, or is that going to be a separate system?
I don't know the answer to that question. You know, the concern that I have about the red light cameras is that obviously when it comes to the police department is going to have to have a function in that as the issuing authority of the ticket or something. I think we're going to have to be involved in it. I know our traffic division has been involved in some of the conversations, but I don't know. I don't think it'll be integrated into C4. Although that's a good question. I mean, that's that many more cameras that are out there. I don't know enough about that technology to really answer that question. I can either get you an answer, you know, if a red light camera is, I think the way they're designed is really to detect the red light violation. I don't know if they double as like a regular, like a PTZ, like a pan tilt zoom camera. I don't know that, but I can find out.
Thank you, because I'm pretty sure the enforcement has to come through the police department, correct?
The what?
The enforcement. So if there's a
I believe it
violator,
does, yeah. I believe it does. So that, you know, again, in the world of like staffing and things, there's going to be some questions about exactly how that works.
So there's nothing that's been, no conversations yet?
Not with me.
Okay,
No.
all right, thank you. Thank you, Chief.
I know we looked at a couple of vendors, and I think, you know, we gave some assistance with that. Chris Mastriani from C4 talked a little bit about it, but nothing, very, very high level.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Majority Leader Rossetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, on 23-2 in the budget book, 044 and 049, special events Dono and Dillon. I mean, I may know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So some of that, particularly Dono, is parades, correct?
44 Dono, you said is,
Special events Dono.
yep.
Is some of that yard goats?
Yeah, downtown north, yep.
And would Dillon be athletics?
Dillon is 049, special events Dillon.
And is that athletics?
Hartford Athletics?
Yeah.
Yes.
So parades aside, for the two ones that generate revenue for themselves, how much of that cost do we cover, of covering them? Do they have anything that they put back in?
That would be an OMB question. You know, some of these events are reimbursable, some of them are somewhat reimbursable, like the Puerto Rican Day Parade, for example. There's some of that is
Not a parade, I mean yard goats and athletics.
I don't know how much of that is reimbursable. It's in our budget. So I do know that Dunkin' Donuts Park, as part of the agreement, I believe we cover that amount of overtime. That's on us. That's not reimbursable.
What about athletics?
I don't know if the same agreement was made for Hartford Athletics.
That's not reimbursable either.
So that's not reimbursable either. Same thing, it was negotiated in, so for $42,000, that's how we cover Dillon Stadium.
So that is the full cost, they're not required to pay anything?
They're not required to pay that. So like Dunkin' Donuts Park and Dillon Stadium, if it's outside of their regularly scheduled events, they will fund like special events where they need to hire us, but this is their regular season.
Okay, thank you.
Council President Surgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Chief, first of all, I really do believe the CSO should come to the meetings. I think it's a lot of, we have developed relationships with them. I mean, granted, the lieutenants and the captains, wonderful and great, but over the years, when you have a relationship with that CSO and they come to the meetings, you know, as you and I know, we have gone back and forth with this with the CSO. So I'm asking, you know, for you to actually start sending the CSO to the community meetings because they know everyone. And there's a relationship that was built over years of working with them. So if you would consider doing that again, it'd be very much appreciated.
I will consider anything, but, you know, unfortunately, as, you know, I just kind of answered the previous question here, I mean, we're really not in a place where I got to be kind of creative, and there's no time where I will not please everyone more than now. Like, so, you know, as part of the, hey, can we get some, you know, can we get some officers out on the beat? We can. I mean, you know, and that's where we had to use the CSOs for that. The beat is a CSO function. It is a community engagement function. I like it when I can have my CSOs go to the neighborhood meetings, and I can have a bunch of walk beats that are doing their own thing. We just don't have the staffing to do that. So I'm trying to satisfy the requests of all residents, and you know, even as you know, even at the Marge meeting, because I know I hear Hyacinth back there. You know, she's adamant about having those CSOs, and sometimes there's 3 of them that sit at that Marge meeting for 2-3 hours at a time. That is not a good use of the CSO's time. And if we can get to a place where staffing allows that, then I'm 100% behind it. But as of right now, we have people that were even in that audience that applauded the idea of them actually being out in the neighborhoods while those folks are at the meeting. You know, they're walking the beats, they're making sure houses and cars aren't being broken into. So it's really, as I said earlier, we're spread thin. We're trying to be as efficient as we can. You know, that is not a long-term thing. It's not a policy decision that's going to, you know, that's going to rule the day. Where CSOs are not going to go to neighborhood meetings. I mean, that's the idea. But as of right now, I have lieutenants that are assigned to those very neighborhoods. And I also think it's a good idea for you to get to know more than that one person. And we've had that conversation too. I don't want the police department to be represented by any one person, me or the assistant chief or one CSO. And that's why we're trying to, you know, rotate some of these folks through. So some of our, the one thing about the newer generation officer, other than the fact that they don't like to work voluntary overtime as much, is that they constantly want change and they want to be challenged and they want to do different things. And when you have CSOs that have done 15 years in one neighborhood as a CSO, one, there's research that shows that that can breed corruption. Before you know it, they're eating for free in places and they're doing things that they shouldn't do. And number two, that's the only person that everyone in that neighborhood knows. And I've heard people say it. Well, you know, not all cops are good, but I like my one. And I want to have neighborhood people have more than one cell phone number or 2, mine and the CSO, in their phone. And I think you got to spread that wealth a little bit. It's not popular, but I do believe in it. And, you know, we'll see what the next chief thinks of it. But, you know, we will try to still sprinkle in some cameo appearances by the CSOs. I promise.
Thank you for that, Chief. But I'm going to push back by saying that, number one, you know, the CSO, and if you want to send a lieutenant and a captain to the NRZ meeting, you may make it 3. But over the last several years, you know, the CSO officer, you know, has been the only person, you know, and now over the last year or so, maybe the captain or the lieutenant, also the sergeant shows up. One of the things community service officers do is develop relationship with the community so we can express ourselves and tell them information. I think, you know, when you look at the CSO officers, the sort of information they have brought back to either narcotics or vice or whatever is important because of that relationship they have developed. with the residents in that community. And I think that's invaluable. I don't disagree with not getting to know my lieutenant or my captain. I have reached out and I do know who they are. But as you develop relationships in a community, especially the minority community, that is really goes a long way. So I'll leave that alone and we'll go back to, I didn't finish my question. That was only a statement. Thank you very much. That was only a statement. So, but my question, I want to go back to the cadet program more than anything else. I know you said in the budget it's under career development, and I see a small increase. But one of the things, as you are, increasing your recruitment and trying to get more police officers, one of the things I was told is the pay scale for the cadets are, you can go to Costco and get a better pay scale.
I agree.
Than, and the number of hours. So, you're talking about a 18, 19-year-old, only the part-time position where they can go and get another position somewhere else, and that decreased the number of hours they're spending working towards the cadet program. So, Chief, if you can give like a budget for maybe a 30 hours, a pay scale that you think will help with recruitment of cadets. That would be
cadet
good
is a
help.
full-time position.
They're full-time.
Yeah, it's a full-time position with benefits. And again, there were some, some incentives that were taken away. Pam just let me know that we increased their pay to $15 an hour. That was what we increased it to. So that's where it sits right now.
$15 an hour?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
That's not minimum wage, Majority Leader says. I'm sorry? $15.69
yeah.
is minimum wage, so they're not even paying them minimum wage?
I think we increased it to 15 because when minimum wage increased, we made it minimum wage. It's probably gone up since then. Yeah, so.
So just one last thing with the cadets. One of the things I've been told, I'm sorry, go ahead, Chief.
No, I was just listening to what Pam said.
One of the things I've been told is when the applications or the posting, you have to be 18 years
Yep,
years old to actually apply.
yep.
But some of the high school students, I think that's a personnel issue that I'll ask the personnel director when they come up again for their budget hearing. Why can't they apply at 17 knowing that they're going to be turning 18 a year from now? Because then you have wasted a whole year when they could have actually,
I don't think that number is set in stone. I remember writing the proposal to allow, because you used to have to either get hired or fired at 21. When you turned 21 as a cadet, when I was a cadet, you either were eligible to go to the academy or you were out. And we increased it for both police and fire to 25 because not every 21-year-old, I'm sure I was an exception to this, but not every 21-year-old was mature enough to be a police officer, right? And I can attest that that's true. So what we said was, let's increase the maximum age to 25 so that if we had somebody with some maturity issues or something, we could, work on that and, put them in the academy when they're 22 or 23. So I don't know that there's a reason why we couldn't go down on the other side. Again, that would be an HR question.
all right. Thank you, Chief. I'll ask her when she comes up. Thank you.
Thanks.
Councilman Gill.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. We had just a very little discussion about the HART team, and I don't know to what extent you have any statistics on number of calls that they responded to, and I don't know where your piece of that is in this budget. So I'm just wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how HPD integrates with the HART team and what part of the HART team's budget you're covering and who else is covering that budget?
So it's none of me. The HART team is independent of the police department. They have great statistics. The only reason that I know some of them is that we just kind of did the anniversary of the HART team's inception, and we had a press conference around it maybe few months ago. The HART team advanced way quicker than anyone thought it was going to. We really designed it, I was on the committee that kind of put it together, and we really designed it as a co-response model initially because people were leery about, unarmed, no handcuffs, no, going out there and dealing with folks that are in mental health crisis. I think the statistics in like the first year, like 80% of their calls were sole response by the HART team. There was not a co-response. Those folks went out there and, hit the ground running and did their thing. As far as their, larger statistics and stuff, we don't keep those. I'm not sure exactly. I can certainly get them to you by email. I'll find who houses them. ES&T has a lot of statistics on the HART team. And the HART team themselves keep very good statistics. So, but none of that falls under us. I can tell you that they've quickly become, an invaluable resource to us. I think some cops were a little hesitant in the beginning about this whole thing, but now they're constantly calling for the HART team on the radio, and you can almost hear disappointment in their voice if they're not available. I think that that program has been a huge success. To Patricia McIntosh's credit and everybody that's worked on it. We work very well with them. We have nothing but good things to say about them and vice versa. So, but as far as statistics, I don't know where to get those other than from the HART team themselves.
What budget are they under?
No idea.
Well, if it's ARPA, they're going to disappear. So well, we can ask the budget director.
I don't think it's ARPA, but I'm not sure honestly where they're funded. But they're not under the police department umbrella.
Where are they? Are they housed anywhere?
Not the police department. I think they're contracted out. Aren't they contracted out of Cap Region?
Capital Region Mental Health?
Yeah, Cap Region Mental Health, and then Wheeler CRT. Wheeler does the juveniles. But yeah, I don't know where you're finding. I don't know where you're going to find their line item. I mean, when they're out working, they're in cars, they're going to places. I think their offices are out of CRT. But again, those are questions for the HART team. I don't have answers to them.
Thanks
I'm
very
just
much.
guessing.
Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, sir. Chief, I want to come back to the shot spotter a little bit. I'm sure you've read a number of cities have sort of started to reassess shot spotter. Chicago, Atlanta, Portland. Atlanta did a study that it more or less, in the end, duplicated what they were getting from call, like old-fashioned, I heard gunshots at this place calls. And so a lot of folks have felt like it, and even if it's working, in other words, it's accurate, it's getting information in, that it's not, from what I can understand, there's not really any data to show that it reduces crime or increases, in a demonstrable way, the apprehension of people who were shooting shots. So my question to you on that point is, have you, not you, but the department, have you done any assessment of what demonstrable benefit ShotSpotter provides in terms, like demonstrable with data benefit that ShotSpotter gives us for all that money?
I mean, we have, number one, I've followed these other cities that, that have decided for one reason or another, either not to use ShotSpotter or, in Chicago, a lot of it was that they've, a lot of these larger cities especially have limited the number of calls they respond to. And, we have not had to do that here. Although every day I see a new article that comes in through International Association of Chiefs of Police or Police Executive Research Forum of cities that have said, we're not going to respond to XYZ, car accidents with no injuries. Exchange information and be on your way, we're not coming. That's a scary trend in my opinion. But in Chicago's case, I mean, they were spending all this money and they weren't responding to the ShotSpotter activations, which I mean, I guess from a budgetary perspective, you could say that that doesn't make much sense to spend all the money on something that you're not using. And then they had a tragedy where officers responded to a ShotSpotter activation, and somebody was shot, which is not ShotSpotter's fault. I think that's an officer training issue. What I can tell you, we don't have any, analysis. Our real-time crime center has been doing analysis on impacts of cameras. Our researcher and Sergeant Mastriani have done a lot of data on that. I don't know of anyone that's done a specific study on it, other than we have data that shows pre-ShotSpotter only about 20% of shots fired calls were being called in. I know we have specific incidents prior to ShotSpotter where we came out the next day and people heard gunshots and didn't call us, and we found a person deceased in a backyard. We are getting those calls now, and we are responding to those calls now. We are finding, people that are injured. I think that's probably, in my personal opinion, it's probably the best argument for ShotSpotter is, when shots ring out, more often than not, someone is an intended target and may actually be struck by gunfire, and getting us there quickly can be the difference between, life and death.
But
I
don't
also
have any measure of that, any data. This is and I'm not saying it's not true what you've observed.
the only
but
data I think would be the data that would show how many shots fired calls were called in pre-ShotSpotter, and even with ShotSpotter. We have data that shows, of the 100% of ShotSpotter activations, how many of those come with a citizen caller, and it's less than half. So we have data on that we can certainly provide. That's something that we keep a running tally of. As far as again, other than anecdotal data about getting officers there quickly, having people know what cameras to look at when, to try to pick up a fleeing car, most of our shootings and most of our crime in general is being caught on cameras now. And from a shooting perspective, a lot of that is directed by ShotSpotter. As far as a cost-benefit analysis, we haven't done that. Data beyond, citizen caller data versus ShotSpotter data, that is where really our hard data lives, is right there. And I can certainly provide that for you. We do have that.
Thanks. Different question, sort of going to what Assistant Majority Leader Clark had been asking about the cars. This body passed an ordinance in 2014 saying that every city-owned car should have a GPS unit in it. This came up a couple years ago, and I remember the COO telling me that or maybe you told me, about half of police vehicles had GPS in them at that point. Is that?
I think it's more now because of the computers. What is the AVL, the automated vehicle locator data comes through the camera. It comes through the laptops, the computers that are in the cars. A lot more of our cars now have those computers.
And are all the new cars that are coming in that you were talking about with Councilman Clark, those all have something that can locate them?
AVL, yeah, AVL. They come in the computers that's how we do our vehicle locators, AVL data, automated vehicle locator data.
So in some sense, at least the police department will get to compliance sort of through turnover of cars.
Yeah, as the computers go in the car, those are. It actually shows up now on our big screen in C4, like where every car is, and we've used AVL for, investigating citizen complaints. We've used it for making sure we have, compliance with pursuit policies and things like that. The AVL data is good data. It gives us not only location but speed and other things that comes in handy.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the purchasing of cars. I think you said 20 last year?
This year's vet request, I think, is either 20 or 22. And really what that is, service life of cars we have. So, if we have, 10 cars with 150,000 miles on them, we will put in those 10 cars and that they need to be replaced. Total losses, our accidents that are total losses, we'll add those in. And it comes to a different number every year. I think this year is 2022, somewhere in there.
So there's a state program, the state of Connecticut program that allows municipalities, because the state has a contract with a company, right? You're aware of this. I think MHQ is a company
Yep.
for all of the state police vehicles. And
We
municipalities.
use MHQ as well.
But MHQ doesn't have Tahoes.
Yes, they do.
My understanding, at least, is last year, for example, the Tahoes that the city bought, it did not buy from MHQ. It
We
bought
did
from
not.
a different vendor.
Correct.
And then separate from that vendor, a different outfitter. In other words, because police cars, right, they have, there's the body, and then there's all the stuff that goes in, the cages, the push bars, whatever else. So there's
Because we couldn't get the cars upfitted, initially, we used 3 separate vendors to try to get our vehicles upfitted. As I said, they were sitting in garages with their year 2022, and we couldn't get them upfitted. We have sent cars, both Ford and Chevys, both Ford. The difference is MHQ sells Ford. They will sell you a Ford Explorer. They don't sell Chevrolet, but they'll upfit both of them. And there's no real cost benefit to doing it either way. There's a vehicle charge and there's an upfit charge. Certain years, the Ford Explorer has been more expensive significantly than the Chevy Tahoe. In certain years, the Chevy Tahoe has been more expensive than the Ford Explorer. We have a mixed fleet. We have both that we've bought over the last couple of years. But there is a Fleet Automotive in I believe it's West Haven, Connecticut. We've used them for upfitting. MHQ we've used for upfitting. And then this year, for the first year, we used an outfit just outside of Boston to upfit our vehicles because, frankly, we needed these vehicles to be upfit. Some of them were a year into their warranty, and we weren't even using them yet. And certain vendors could get certain equipment that other vendors couldn't. So we really had to go with kind of a shotgun approach and use as many vendors as we could.
Because last year, Interceptors were available from MHQ. That's the Ford Explorer cop version is
Yep.
the Interceptor. Those were available from MHQ, already upfit, ready to go for $65,000. But the city bought Tahoes elsewhere, one place to buy them, somewhere else to upfit them for $75,000. And that was 20 cars last year. That's $200,000.
No, I believe 10 of those were Explorers. We bought both. MHQ, they only have a certain allocation. So we might only be able to get 8 Ford Explorers from MHQ. We might be able to get 12. We might be able to get 10. In this day and age, it's more about, can you get the car? And then you say, okay, I can get the car. Now, can I get it upfitted? Because even with the Tahoes, you're only going to get a certain number of them through Northwest Hills, state contract for Tahoes. You might only be able to get 8. You might only be able to get 6. If we're budgeted and we're allowed to get 15 cars, we want to get 15 cars. For a lot of reasons, the Tahoe platform is a superior platform to the Ford platform, especially in the city. 2-wheel drive versus all-wheel drive, selectable, box frame. If we do get into an accident, a lot easier to repair than a unibody construction. Size, the Explorer is a much smaller vehicle when you put a cage in it. There's a lot of those reasons. If you go back 2 years ago, I think the Ford Explorer was about $6,000 more than the Tahoe. And then Chevy caught up and they did an increase, and then the Chevy surpassed the Ford.
All I'm saying is that I looked at the numbers for last year, and there were Interceptors available, and they were $10,000 less. And the city, the department, from what I understand, prefers the Tahoes. As you say, the Tahoes are wider, they're heavier, they're more dangerous to pedestrians, they accelerate more slowly, and they get worse gas mileage. Why choose the Tahoe? It's a bigger car that goes slower and uses more gas. In the city.
I would disagree with almost everything you just said. I would look on the Michigan State Police analysis.
That's where I got this information.
I think for the city, an all-wheel drive vehicle, when they're going over curbs and sometimes train tracks and potholes, the front ends on those Fords, they take a beating. There's a lot of reasons that we have a mixed fleet. We don't go with any one vehicle. It's not always based entirely on cost. A lot of times it's based on availability, what we can get. I am not anti-Ford, but I do believe from my time on the fleet committee that the selectable four-wheel drive options in the Tahoe, the size of the Tahoe, the amount of stuff that we can put in the back of the Tahoe, I think the Tahoe is better suited for what we do with it here in the city. Even that said, though, You know, we've purchased both. The only thing that we really never dabbled in was the Dodge because of the ratings and you know, just never was a car that would fit what we do.
Charger you're talking about?
The Charger or the Durango. They make a Durango in a PPV, police pursuit vehicle. But again, it's a judgment call. You know, the next chief could come in here and say, all I want is Fords. When you look around the state of Connecticut, you know, I took a lot of heat for backing the idea that the Tahoe was a good vehicle. The fact that that platform, you know, is being sold with 200,000 miles on it for, you know, $2-3 grand still. Those Tahoes last a long time. And longevity in the city, we don't always get 20 cars. We don't even always get 10 cars a year. I'm looking for a vehicle that can last, you know, for the better part of 10 years. Even when Ford made the Expedition, we had Expeditions for a long period of time, and they served us well. So I think there's a lot more that has to be, you know, looked at there. But, you know, this day and age, it's about, can I get the vehicles, and can I get them upfitted, and can I get them here in a reasonable period of time?
And ultimately, that's your call?
Yes.
Totally different topic. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, the department had in its budget some chunk of money to set up a Slack channel, which was supposed to be for citizens to report, a new way for citizens to report crimes and connect with the police. Do you recall that?
It was part of a grant proposal last year, and it did not work out. We ended up using the money for, we invested the money in more camera technology for the public-private partnership. The Slack, you know, kind of that was a grant application that included a piece of money, I can't remember how much it was, to try to explore the idea of a better way, quicker way to communicate with, like, neighborhood groups, and Slack was initially thought of that might be a good way to do it. It did not work out that way, and we did not end up doing that, but that was a grant.
But so then, just so that money, you didn't even spend that money on Slack, you spent it on other stuff.
Correct. We asked for permission to reallocate that money in the grant, and bought more cameras for the public-private partnership where we're supporting, you know, Sands, for example. We put all brand-new cameras in there for them, with the caveat that we would be able to access them in, you know, in the case of an emergency and things. That was also part of that grant. That money was reallocated in that grant.
Gotcha. And I think I'm actually, dear colleagues, I'm gonna wrap up. I'll tell you to people who don't remember, usually the chief and I have long, spirited back and forths. And as we were all sitting back here eating, someone said, well, when are we finishing up tonight? Everyone looked at me. And so I'm gonna skip the long, spirited back and forth because what I realize is that asking the chief of police whether the police should be funded as much as they're funded is sort of not the point. His bailiwick is the police, and how do the police spend their money? And he's going to say, we would like more money to do more police things.
Advocacy.
Right. I mean, look, I didn't wear this for you. I was in court advocating today, so I know what you're
I don't know. Councilman Gale said you were for me. I don't know.
I'm sorry to...
I know, I got it.
What I will say is this. What I have realized from my back and forth with the chief over these years is that none of it matters. Frequently, the chief has been very honest with me, and he said, like, we don't have any data that shows that having more police reduces crime. We don't have any data that shows that more police spending reduces crime. We have specific things that we think in a neighborhood or at a moment can reduce crime, and we try to do those, right? He's been very forthright with me about that. I have brought up, you've all heard me say it many times, I have brought up that this city has more than twice as many police as the national average per capita, that any way you compare it to another city, we have more police. And from year to year, one time Councilman Gale said, but you haven't compared metropolitan statistical areas, and I wasn't ready for that one, and I had to go and look it up, and in fact, that was still right. And then someone said, but you haven't compared call volumes. And I went and looked that one up, and in fact, we are still way out of proportion for call volumes. There is no piece of data that justifies the size of our police department. And I once had a colleague say to me that they heard where I was coming from, but they weren't going to be the one to tell the most involved citizens, the older homeowners, that they were cutting police, that it should be me who was going to tell them. And I think that's the trouble here, is that sometimes we have to speak hard truths to our constituents, and the hard truth here is that adding more and more police is not reducing crime. And what's more, it is taking away money from the things that we want to spend money on. So I hope all of my colleagues, for example, none of you has asked, why is the number of police that we need, that the chief says 476? 476. He says we're understaffed. And if you ask him why, because I've asked him many times, he'll say, we did an analysis. And I'll say, what is the tell me about the analysis. He says, well, I'll send it to you. He doesn't send it to me. But it's a made-up number. Okay? It's a made-up number. It's far beyond anything any of us has ever seen in practically any other city in this country. None of you has asked about that. You've all taken it for granted. Yes, we need more cops. It's like I come in here and I say, I only have one council aide. I did an analysis. I need 6. Right? No one would believe me because I'm me. But you get my point. No one is asking the question. And so when all of you vote for this budget, I hope that you will think of it this way. Go to your constituents and tell them why you didn't vote for raises for lifeguards. Go to them and tell them why you didn't vote for an increase in recreation to put us on par with our neighbors. Go to them and tell them why you didn't vote for an increase for DPW, who have been working so hard for so little for so long. I don't need to give the chief a hard time. He does his job. I understand it. But I need to give you all a hard time, but I'll save it for later. I'm done.
Now I have to follow that. And what I will say is that I don't want to conclude our meeting tonight without congratulating the department once again for that CALIA accreditation. I know it was extremely hard, extremely difficult process, a very comprehensive process. But the hardest part of that accreditation comes now, which is sustaining it, keeping it. And that requires updating policies and require, keeping up with all the demands that that accreditation, comes with. But we got the first step done, which is getting the accreditation. So congratulations to the department for getting that accreditation. I didn't want to leave without mentioning that. And at this point, with no other questions, I'd like to conclude this meeting. So this committee meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.